Moon Knight is an American television miniseries created by Jeremy Slater for the streaming service Disney+, based on the Marvel Comics featuring the character of the same name. It is the sixth television series in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to be produced by Marvel Studios, sharing continuity with the films of the franchise. It follows Mark Spector and Stephen Grant, two alters of a man with dissociative identity disorder, as they are drawn into a mystery involving Egyptian gods. Slater serves as head writer with Mohammed Diab leading the directing team. Oscar Isaac stars as Mark Spector / Moon Knight and Stephen Grant / Mr. Knight, with May Kalamai, Kareem El Hakim, F. Murray Abraham, Ethan Hawke, Anna Kingeran, David Ganley, Khalid Abdallah, Gaspard Ulliel, Antonia Salib, Fernanda Andrade, Ray Lucas, Sophia Danu, and Saba Mubarak also starring. The series was announced in August 2019, with Slater hired in November. Diab was hired to direct 4 episodes in October 2020, with directing duo Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead joining in January 2021 to direct the other 2. Isaac was confirmed to star at the time. He used different accents to differentiate Spector's various identities. Filming took place from April to October 2021, primarily in Budapest as well as in Jordan, Slovenia, and Atlanta, Georgia. Moon Knight premiered on March 30, 2022, and ran for 6 episodes, concluding on May 4. It is part of Phase 4 of the MCU. The series received positive reviews, with particular praise for the performances, the darker tone compared to previous MCU series, and its portrayal of development. In an interview, Doug Moench recalled the character's genesis. Somebody mentioned in the office and suggested using the committee, and that I should bring the committee back, and then I found out who the committee were and thought, well, they're really boring, I don't want to use them. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, how about, if the committee hires a mercenary, to kill the werewolf? And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. Then I create this new character and it won't be these boring guys in business suits, it would be a flashy character. So I said, who is best to kill the werewolf? Well, someone who uses silver weapons because silver hurts the werewolf. And tied to the night because the werewolf only comes out at night, and I'll base this character on the moon, because the moon makes the werewolf change, and this is going to be the opposite of the werewolf. And as soon as I said the moon, I said, ooh, I'll have a costume that's just like the moon, just black and white, jet and silver, no color on the costume. Don Perlin also commented on the character's creation, we were told we needed a costumed character in the book. So Doug and I created Moon Knight. I wanted the costume to be just black and white. Since he'd be on a color page, that would make him a little bit different. He had a silver baton he could use when he battled werewolves. See, he was hired to track down to kill the werewolf. Publication history. The character debuted in Werewolf by Night number 32, written by Doug Moench with art by Don Perlin and Al Milgrom, as a mercenary hired by the committee to capture the title character. The creative team gave Moon Knight moon-related symbols and silver weapons to mark him as a suitable antagonist for the werewolf hero. The 2-part story continues into number 33, when Moon Knight realizes Russell is a victim rather than a monster and decides to help him. A demonic vision of Moon Knight then appeared in Werewolf by Night number 37. Editors Marv Wolfman and Len Wein liked the character and decided to give him a solo story in Marvel Spotlight number 2829, again written by Doug Moench with art by Don Perlin. The story, along with Spectacular Spider-Man number 2223 written by Bill Mantlo, recast Moon Knight as a more heroic character. His association with the Evil Committee during his first appearance was retconned to be an undercover mission he undertook to learn more about the villains. Moon Knight acted as a hero again in Marvel 2-in-1 number 52, written by Stephen Grant with art by Jim Craig. In the Defenders number 4751, Moon Knight briefly joined the Defenders during their war against the Zodiac Cartel. Moon Knight appeared in recurring backup stories in Hulk magazine number 1115, number 1718, and number 20, as well as a black and white story in the magazine publication Marvel Preview number 21, all written by Doug Moench. Artist Bill Sienkiewicz drew Moon Knight in Hulk magazine issues number 1315, 1718, and number 20, creating a new look for the character heavily influenced by the art of Neal Adams, who at that time was most popular for his work on Batman and Green Lantern/Green Arrow for DC Comics. This, along with Moon Knight's methods and the atmosphere of his stories, cemented a perception among some readers that he was Marvel's version of Batman. The Hulk backups and Marvel Preview issue provided Moon Knight with a partial origin story and introduced his brother, recurring villain Randall Spector. Volume 1. Moon Knight received his first ongoing series in 1980, with Doug Moench and Bill Sienkiewicz as its main creative team. The character received an expanded origin story in issue number 1, including Spector's resurrection in the tomb of Khonshu, suggested by editor Denny O'Neil, which also introduced several supporting characters as well as recurring enemy Bushmen. Though many characters doubted the moon god Khonshu was real and believed Mark Spector only experienced a hallucination while near death, it was never explained why others, such as Spector's lover Marlene, concluded this when there was no other explanation for Mark's spontaneous recovery from his wounds in a death-like state. After early sales were good, Marvel made the Moon Knight series a flagship title available in comic shops starting with issue number 15. The companion miniseries Moon Knight, Special Edition reprinted the Hulk and Marvel Preview Moon Knight stories in color and standard comic format, adapted from their original magazine format. Sienkiewicz stopped penciling the series after issue number 30, though he continued to contribute covers until the series ended with issue number 38. Volume 2. In 1985, Marvel retooled the character with a new 6-issue miniseries Moon Knight by Alan Zielnetz and Chris Warner. The miniseries was titled Fist of Khonshu. Only the first 4 issues were written by Zielnetz, the final 2 issues were each written by a different author. Along with giving Moon Knight new Egyptian-themed weaponry, this mini-series reveals that Mark Spector's strength now increases in accordance to the phases of the moon. Marvel Fanfare and West Coast Avengers. Following the Fist of Khonshu mini-series, Moon Knight appeared in Marvel Fanfare for 2 issues and became a regular cast member in West Coast Avengers, written by Steve Englehart. When John Byrne became the series writer, Moon Knight was written out of the West Coast Avengers team. Mark Spector, Moon Knight. After a guest spot in Punisher Annual No. 2, the character was given a new ongoing title in 1989, Mark Spector, Moon Knight, originally under the direction of writer Chuck Dixon. 2 one-shots, Mark Spector, Moon Knight Special Edition No. 1 and Moon Knight, Divided We Fall, were published during the run of the title. Dixon then left the series after issue number 24, leaving several storylines unresolved such as the fate of Moon Knight's errant sidekick, the Second Midnight, who was seemingly killed by the terrorist organization known as the Secret Empire. Midnight 2's fate and plotline were later resolved in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man No. 353-358, written by Al Milgrom. Mark Spector, Moon Knight ended with number 60. Mark Spector seemingly dies in the issue, sacrificing himself while battling a villain called Seth the Immortal. His body is recovered and then buried by his allies. The final storyline was written by Terry Kavanagh and with art by Stephen Platt, who was then hired by Image Comics based on the strength of his work during several of the series' final issues. Volume 3. In 1998, the 4-issue miniseries Moon Knight Vol. 3 was published under writer Doug Moench, artist Tommy Edwards, and inker Robert Campanella. The 4-part story Resurrection Wars shows Mark Spector resurrected again by Khonshu, materializing alive and well in his home while experiencing a vision of himself rising from the grave as Khonshu summons him. Witnessing Mark's sudden manifestation in his home, and noting that the statue of Khonshu explodes only to then repair itself, Marlene finally believes Khonshu is real and not a delusion. Despite this, the story mentions the possibility that Mark was not dead but somehow and inexplicably was put into a death-like state for months as a result of his previous injuries. Volume 4. In 1999, Munch and artist Mark Texeira produced Moon Knight Vol. 4. This 4-part mini-series was nominated for the Comics Buyer's Guide Fan Award for Favorite Limited Series. The title of the story was mistakenly given as High Strangers on each issue cover, while the correct title High Strangeness appeared on the interior title page of each issue. Volume 5. A new ongoing series, Moon Knight Vol. 5, was launched in April 2006, written by Charlie Huston with art by David Finch. The series revises Mark Spector's history by saying he fought in the Gulf War. Starting with issue number 14 of this series, Mike Benson took over writing duties while Huston acted as a story/plot advisor according to Benson. The 2006 series ended with number 30, and only one annual issue for the series was printed in 2008. Peter Milligan wrote a 2008 seasonal one-shot titled Moon Knight, Silent Night with artist Lawrence Campbell. I Vengeance of the Moon Knight/I. None. Volume 6. In 2011, the series Moon Knight Vol. 6 was launched by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Malayev. The series depicted Moon Knight once again experiencing 4 alters, though now 3 of his alters were imitations of Spider-Man, Captain America, and Wolverine. Due to poor sales, the series was cancelled after 12 issues. Volume 7. In March 2014, the Marvel Now! Initiative launched Moon Knight Vol. 7. The series involved rotating creative teams that included Warren Ellis and Declan Shalvey for issues number 1-6, Brian Wood and Greg Smallwood for issues number 7-12, and Cullen Bunn and Ron Atkins for issues number 13-17. The series brings back the white suit and tie outfit first seen in Secret Avengers, and now has Moon Knight adopt this outfit when working as a police consultant, answering to Mr. Knight. With issue number 1 of this series, writer Warren Ellis confirmed that Khonshu is a real god or extraterrestrial entity and that Mark Spector indeed died and was resurrected years ago in the tomb in Egypt. Issue number 1 of this series depicted a psychologist confirming that stress and the use of multiple cover identities cannot cause someone to suffer from DID if they did not already suffer from the condition, and that Mark's symptoms do not correspond to actual DID. Mark Spector's different alters are now said to be due to brain damage, alterations to his brain made by the alien entity Khonshu that connect their minds. These alterations also cause Moon Knight to sometimes shift his personality to match one of the Moon God's 4 distinct roles and facets. These 4 roles are described as Pathfinder, Embracer, Defender, and Watcher of Overnight Travelers. These 4 roles can manifest in different ways, either with original names or borrowing names and personality traits of people Mark has observed. Volume 8. In April 2016, the all-new, all-different Marvel initiative included the new series Moon Knight Vol. 8 written by Jeff Lemire and artist Greg Smallwood. The series began having rotating artists with issue number 6. After 14 issues, the series numbering changed to acknowledge it was a continuation of the Moon Knight volumes published before, so issue number 15 was instead given the designation number 188. This renumbering was done as part of the company-wide Marvel Legacy Initiative. The series ended with issue number 200, which involved contributions from several previously established Moon Knight artists. In 2019, Cullen Bunn wrote and Ibrahim Mustafa and Matt Horak drew Moon Knight Annual No. 1. Lemire's stories revised Mark's history to show he had first exhibited symptoms of DID and assumed the identity of his alter Stephen Grant while still a young boy. The series also showed Concha creating a psychic connection between himself and Mark Spector when the latter was still a boy, indicating the moon god may still be responsible for Mark's DID-like condition. In the series, Concha claims he influenced Mark at times over the years, waiting until years later to fully reveal himself. Concha then reveals he intends to use Mark as a host body, fully dominating his personality, but Mark refuses. The series has Mark acknowledge that he had exhibited DID symptoms long before assuming the mask of Moon Knight and that his previous claim that his alters were nothing more than cover identities was simply denial of his condition. In Avengers Vol. 8 No. 3338, Concha attempts to dominate Earth to save it, compelling Moon Knight to help him. A battle with the Avengers results in Concha being imprisoned by the Asgardians. The story was produced by Jason Aaron, Javier Guerin, and Jason Keith. Volume 9. In 2021, the series Moon Knight Vol. 9 launched under writer Jed MacKay, and artists Alessandro Capuccio and Rachel Rosenberg. The new series has Mark Spector not only acting as the crime fighter Moon Knight but also adopting the role of High Priest of the Midnight Mission, a congregation dedicated to Khonshu. In discussing his connection to Khonshu, Mark Spector now describes his four aspects as the Traveler, the Pathfinder, the Embracer, the Defender of those who travel at night. Once again, Mark Spector is depicted as being in regular therapy with a psychologist to help manage his psychological issues. The series also offers that Mark Spector may be immortal, as he has now been literally resurrected on multiple occasions and could be resurrected again in the future. I Moon Knight, Black, White, and Blood/I. None. Fictional character biography. Origin. Born in Chicago, Illinois, Mark Spector is the Jewish-American son of Elias Spector, a rabbi who survived Nazi persecution. In the other void, a realm outside of normal time and space, the entity Khonshu becomes interested in Mark. Khonshu and those like him cannot leave the other void without great difficulty but can create psychic connections with hosts and avatars in the physical universe of Earth. Believing Mark Spector to have a weak mind that makes him vulnerable to psychic connection, Khonshu chooses the boy to one day act as his knight and avatar. After Khonshu chooses Mark, the boy discovers by chance that Rabbi Yitz Perlman, a close friend of his family, is really a Nazi named Ernst who continues to target and murder Jews. Mark fights Perlman and escapes. Perlman then disappears without a trace. Soon afterward, Mark Spector begins showing signs of dissociative identity disorder. Mark believes he meets and befriends a boy named Stephen Grant, not realizing he himself is acting as Stephen at times. In a vision, Mark sees Khonshu promising to one day heal the boy's mind. Khonshu, being an entity who has multiple aspects to his personality and exists out of phase with normal time and space, later claims that Mark's alters are the result of his mind trying to echo the moon god's own multifaceted nature. As a teenager, Mark exhibits another alter in addition to Stephen named Jake Lockley. The appearance of this third alter leads Mark's parents to send him to live at Putnam Psychiatric Hospital. Released to attend his father's funeral, Mark escapes and joins the U.S. Marine Corps, where he becomes a formidable combatant and a trained heavyweight boxer. After Mark serves 3 years in Force Recon, the Marines discover he lied on his paperwork and conclude his history of mental illness makes him unfit for duty. He is discharged and earns a living as an underground boxer and fighter in Baghdad until he is recruited by French pilot and mercenary Jean-Paul Frenchy Duchamp. The two work together on several assignments. During this time, Spector encounters CIA operative Jason Mason-Dale, who later becomes the costumed mercenary Jack O'Lantern and then becomes the second villain to adopt the name Hobgoblin. Mark's brother Randall Specter becomes a mercenary as well, but is driven by bloodlust. In Italy, Randall kills Mark's girlfriend Lisa. After a violent confrontation, Mark leaves Randall for dead. Randall later recovers from his injuries. Eventually, Frenchie and Mark meet mercenary Raoul Bushman, who is impressed by their work and recruits them to help with certain jobs. Specter considers that morally he exists in the center between Frenchie, a good man with a firm moral center, and Bushman, a ruthless, often amoral man who takes pride in his ability to kill. Specter and Frenchie accept a contract with Bushman helping a local warlord in the Sudan quell a rebellion. One of the rebels they shoot down is Mark's own brother Randall, though Mark is unaware of this and does not even know that Randall is in the area. Despite his bullet wounds, Randall survives, convinced Mark recognized him and deliberately tried to kill him. Mark Specter is appalled at Bushman's bloodlust and that he targets civilians as well as enemy combatants. Bushman kills Dr. Peter Alron, an archaeologist whose team recently unearthed a hidden tomb. Bushman intends to loot the tomb and kill any witnesses. Specter scares off Marlene, saving her life, and then engages Bushman in combat. Defeated, Specter is injured and abandoned in the desert without food or shelter, suffering in the freezing temperature of the night. Despite this, he makes his way back to civilization before collapsing, near death. Locals carry him into the tomb and leave him before a statue of Khonshu, moon god and protector of travelers at night. Marlene realizes Mark saved her life earlier and prepares to mourn him as his heart stops. Moments later, Mark Specter revives, fully healed. He claims to have seen the moon god Khonshu and been chosen to now act as the moon's Knight of Vengeance, the Fist of Khonshu. Marlene believes this was a dream or delusion. Mark takes a silver, hooded cloak from the statue of Khonshu, adopting it as his own. Randall watches this all from nearby. As soon as Mark leaves, Randall presents himself to the same statue of Khonshu, hoping to also be blessed with power and have his wounds healed. When nothing happens, he resents Mark for winning the moon god's favor instead. I Werewolf by Night, Hulk, /I Magazine I, Moon Knight /I Vol. 1. None. I Moon Knight /I Vol. 2 I Fist of Khonshu /I and I West Coast Avengers /I. None. I Mark Specter, Moon Knight /I. None. I Moon Knight /I Vol. 3 Resurrection Wars, I Moon Knight /I Vol. 4 High Strangeness. None. I Moon Knight /I Vol. 5. None. I Vengeance of the Moon Knight /I. None. I Secret Avengers /I. None. I Moon Knight /I Vol. 6. None. I Avengers vs X-Men /I. None. I Moon Knight /I Vol. 7. None. I Moon Knight /I Vol. 8. None. Crazy runs in the family. After reappropriating Khonshu, Mark Specter resumes his normal life and his Moon Knight activities. Raoul Bushman collaborates with a mysterious mental patient only referred to as Patient 86, who becomes an avatar of Ra and calls himself the Sun King. Together they come up with a plot to kill Moon Knight. To accomplish their plan, Bushman and Sun King go to Marlene's house and discovered she and Jake Lockley had a child together, a revelation that shocks Mark Specter and Stephen Grant. Raoul and Sun King then kidnap Marlene and lure Moon Knight to an island base. With Khonshu's guidance, Moon Knight is able to overpower Sun King, although Bushman escapes. The Age of Khonshu. Deciding to take over Earth to protect it, Khonshu compels Moon Knight to acquire power for him. With enhanced abilities and insight, and convinced that Khonshu's plan is the only way to protect Earth from the demon lord Mephisto and others, Moon Knight takes the power of Iron Fist, Ghost Rider's Hellfire, Thor's hammer Mjolnir, and some of Doctor Strange's magic. With this and more, Khonshu begins to reshape Earth. During a battle with the Black Panther, Moon Knight temporarily becomes a host for the Cosmic Phoenix Force. But rather than allow the Phoenix power to cleanse the Earth by wiping out humanity, Moon Knight releases the power even while the Avengers defeat Khonshu. The Asgardians imprison Khonshu and Moon Knight is allowed to return to his activities. The Black Panther offers him membership in the Avengers again, but he refuses, preferring to focus on battles he understands and angry at Khonshu's extreme actions. I Moon Knight/I Vol. 9. None. Powers and Abilities. Skills and Training. Moon Knight is an Olympic-level athlete and a skilled acrobat who excels at combat strategy. Spectre is a superb driver and can pilot a helicopter. Thanks to his life experience and training as a U.S. Marine, boxer, and mercenary, Mark Spector became an expert at hand-to-hand combat, marksmanship, boxing, kung fu, eskrima, judo, karate, ninjutsu, savate, and muay thai. Moon Knight's fighting style combines elements of various combat techniques and relies heavily on adaptability, using the environment to his advantage, intimidating his opponents, and accepting a certain level of pain and injury. The villain and mercenary Taskmaster, who can perfectly replicate fighting styles, has stated he prefers not to copy Moon Knight since the hero would sometimes rather take a punch than block or dodge it. Moon Knight is shown to possess a very high tolerance for pain and torture. Moon Knight is also an expert detective. Investigation is an important part of his stories, where he is often aided by his other personalities. Jake Lockley gathers information on the street level, Stephen Grant among the rich and influential figures, and Mr. Knight works with the NYPD investigating police cases. Technology and equipment. As Moon Knight, Spectre typically wears lightweight, Kevlar body armor and a specially constructed, silver glider cape that can catch winds and thermal updrafts. He typically wears metal bracers on his wrists and calves. Later costumes have added metal plates providing extra protection to his chest and shoulders. Moon Knight employs a variety of weapons over the course of his career, many of which involve or are made of silver. His most commonly used weapons are his silver crescent darts and an adamantium-reinforced truncheon that can fire a grappling hook and extend into a bee-staff. At times, he has also used nunchaku and a compound bow. For a brief time, Moon Knight wore gauntlets with spiked knuckles. At one point, Moon Knight accepted golden and ivory Egyptian-themed weapons created by followers of Khonshu. These included bolas, golden scarab-shaped darts, an ivory boomerang, throwing irons, an axe-shaped lasso grapple, and a golden ankh-shaped blunt weapon which glowed in the presence of danger. These items were later replaced with duplicate weapons designed by Hawkeye. In a period while suffering from health issues, Moon Knight adopts thin, lightweight adamantium armor for greater protection. During this time, he acquires an adamantium staff, a truncheon capable of firing a cable line, and gauntlets that fire crescent darts. During the events of Dark Reign, the Tinkerer makes Moon Knight carbonadium armor with joint locking functions, reinforcing his strength. Moon Knight uses this feature to support a building from collapsing, despite a lack of superhuman strength. Additionally, the armor could instantly assemble around his body after being triggered by remote control. For transportation, Moon Knight employs a variety of sophisticated aircraft such as the Mooncopter and the Angel Wing, a mini-jet featuring VTOL and 20mm cannons. At times, Moon Knight has also used a white, customized motorcycle, a remote-controlled white limousine, and a remote-controlled crescent-shaped drone/glider capable of carrying a single person. During the onset of the Age of Khonshu event, Mark was provided by the cult whom worships his divinity with magical angst that enabled him to drain away and utilize the primordial powers bestowed upon Earth's mightiest through their colorful prehistoric ancestry. Taking the powers of the Iron Fist from Daniel Rand, the vengeance spirit Zarathos from the Ghost Rider alongside his Hell Charger, and the mystical abilities pertaining to the Sorcerer Supreme Doctor Strange. He acquired these with the intent of assimilating those of the Star Brand, the Phoenix Force and the Odin Force imbued Mjolnir belonging to All-Father Thor as well. Superpowers. On more than one occasion, Mark Spector has died and then been resurrected by the other-dimensional entity Khonshu. It is not known if Khonshu will continually do this, making Mark Spector effectively immortal, or if he will only do this until he chooses a new champion. Due to his brain being altered by Khonshu, Mark Spector is more resistant to telepathic and psychic attack than the average person. He sometimes experiences visions of prophecy or enhanced insight. Some initially believed these visions were delusions or inspired simply by Spector inadvertently performing self-hypnosis, but it is now known that Khonshu is real and grants him these visions. It has been implied in several stories that Mark's connection to Khonshu and this supernatural insight increases when he wears his Moon Knight costume, as it represents vestments of the moon god. The villain for higher profile has a superhuman analysis ability that does not function properly on beings with supernatural/magic-based abilities, and remarked that he found it painful to look at Mark Spector whenever the hero donned his Moon Knight costume. Profile was not sure if this was due to Spector's mental illness or if wearing the costume helped Moon Knight tap directly into the moon god's power. During the time that Moon Knight adopted golden and ivory weapons, his strength, endurance, and reflexes would increase depending on the phases of the moon, operating on a superhuman level during a full moon night. Even during a new moon, he can lift several hundred pounds. Although some believed this superhuman strength had nothing to do with Khonshu and was the result of self-hypnosis, it is now known that Khonshu is real and is directly connected to Mark Spector. Khonshu later removed this power from Moon Knight as punishment for disobedience and has never returned it. After the Serpent War, Mark's patron deity Khonshu opted to further empower his champion on Earth with all new abilities in preparation for the rise of Mephistopheles. By giving his herald the lion's share of the moon supremacy's power, Mark would be endowed with all the abilities of his namesake as the Fist of Khonshu along with a couple others outside of the criteria. He is granted the transformational capability to change to and from his costumed identity at will, on top of powers over lunar effects such as creating astral rock formations consisting of planetary orbital satellites, raising and commanding the dead, mummies loyal to his divinity, lunar empowerment under the supermoon created by Khonshu's will and the ability to survive unaided in the cold recesses of space without life support. These powers gave Moon Knight enough raw might to battle and defeat the world's most powerful heroes, the Avengers. For a brief time Moon Knight became a host avatar for the immortal Phoenix Force, the cosmological raptor that governs life, death, and rebirth throughout the universe and potentially the multiverse. Possessing all the typical skills and abilities of an avatar to the cosmic entity regarding cosmic pyrokinesis, telekinesis, flight, etc. Supporting characters. Throughout his different stories, certain supporting characters frequently help Mark Spector in his activities as Moon Knight. Marlene Alron, an archaeologist, her father is murdered by Raoul Bushman. She meets and is saved by Mark hours before his first resurrection at the hands of Khonshu. Despite her initial belief that Khonshu is not real, she supports Mark's career as Moon Knight, becoming his advisor and aide as well as his lover, carrying his daughter Beatrice Alron. Later, she believes Khonshu is real but still encourages Moon Knight to leave violence behind and live fully as either Mark Spector or Stephen Grant. The two separate on multiple occasions. Bertrand Crawley, a homeless man and former textbook salesman who acts as one of Moon Knight's informants regarding unusual activities on the streets. Jean-Paul Frenchy Duchamp, Moon Knight's helicopter pilot and closest friend. The two meet after Mark left the Marines. Frenchie is a mercenary but with moral principles he does not like to compromise, leading him to fully support Mark Spector's choice to protect people and avenge the wronged rather than profit from combat and killing. Cult of Khonshu, a secret and isolated cult of priests and scholars dedicated to Khonshu. The members are driven to aid Khonshu's avatars on Earth and have provided Mark Spector with special information and weaponry on rare occasions. At different times, rogue factions of the cult of Khonshu, believing Mark Spector is not fit to be the Moon Knight, have acted against him. Gina Landers, a diner manager. She is a friend to Jake Lockley and helps him gain information. Ray Landers, the son of Gina Landers, he is an expert pilot and mechanic who helps Jake Lockley gain information. He pilots the Mooncopter when Frenchie is unavailable. Ricky Landers, the son of Gina Landers and brother of Ray Landers. Reese, a vampire aided by Moon Knight. She is his assistant in managing the Midnight Mission and acts as his researcher during different criminal investigations. Shadow Cabinet, a temporary council of advisors to Mark Spector's business and vigilante activities. Members used codenames and held meetings via video conference or holographic projection. The Shadow Cabinet included tech expert Stash, businesswoman Penny Annie, low-level crime boss Don G., and psychologist Sigmund. Hunter's Moon, Dr. Baldur, another follower of Khonshu and the Left Fist. Dietrice Alron, the daughter of Mark Spector and Marlene Alron. Khonshu, the god who gave Mark Spector his powers and identity as his avatar. While an ally for Mark for his early adventures and recent stories, he grew more antagonistic, such as when he was the main villain of the 2016 series and the Age of Khonshu storyline in Jason Aaron's run on Avengers. Detective Flint, a detective who acts as Mark's ally from the Force. Netta, Moon Knight's maid when he was in his Stephen Grant persona. Peter Alron, the father of Marlene Alron, he died by Bushman's hands. Peter Alron, Jr. his son. Created Morpheus by accident. Rob Silverman, Frenchie's husband. Samuel's Moon Knight's butler. Profile an informer banker. A mutant with the ability to analyze anything. Toltec, a vigilante from Mexico. Rogues Gallery. While Moon Knight has fought many famous villains of the Marvel Universe, he has also accumulated his own rogues gallery of villains that have a personal connection to him and or rarely appear outside of his own stories. Moon Knight's major recurring enemies include reception, critical reception. Matt Attanasio of Comicsverse referred to Moon Knight as the excellent example of how anyone can suffer from a mental illness and manage to overcome such an illness, writing, "When you look at Moon Knight's story as a whole, it appears to be more and more of a story about perseverance, endurance, and coming to grips with who you are. That's an extremely universal story. That's something anyone can relate to, in one way or another. It's a call to believe in yourself, and to never give up. And, really, that's one of the most heroic tales you can get." Sci-Fi Wire staff of Sci-Fi called Moon Knight an unusual fan favorite, saying, "For decades, some fans have affectionately called Moon Knight Marvel's Batman. But that's not a strictly accurate way to describe the Fist of Khonshu, who's his own man. While Spector's public cover as a millionaire is definitely Bruce Wayne light, what separates the Moon Knight from the Dark Knight is that he has 3 secret identities." Chase Magnet of comicbook.com stated, "Ever since Moon Knight premiered in the pages of Werewolf by Night in 1975, he has been a cult favorite among superhero fans. It took until 1980 for the complicated hero and his many personalities to get their own ongoing series. It was a hit from the very start with 2 of the great talents of the era doing career-defining work. That high bar has encouraged a lot of others to take similarly distinctive shots at the character ever since." Sean S. Lilos of CBR.com wrote, "Too many people call Moon Knight Marvel's version of Batman. There are some similarities, but Moon Knight is a much more complex character than Batman. Yes, both men are wealthy and use their money to front their crime-fighting adventures, but Batman is just a man fighting for good. Moon Knight has a split personality and struggles to maintain his sanity. He gained the power of super strength, durability, and stamina from the moon god Khonshu. He doesn't mind killing, and most superheroes consider him to be completely insane. Sure, some fans compare him to Batman but only on the surface. Comparisons to Batman. Volumes. I Vengeance of the Moon Knight /I. None. I Moon Knight /I. None. Accolades. In 2011, Wizard ranked Moon Knight 149th in their top 200 comic book characters list. In 2011, IGN ranked Moon Knight 89th in their top 100 comics book heroes list. In 2015, Entertainment Weekly ranked Moon Knight 80th in their Let's Rank Every Avenger Ever list. In 2015, IGN ranked Moon Knight 49th in their top 50 Avengers list. In 2015, BuzzFeed ranked Moon Knight 48th in their 84 Avengers members ranked from worst to best list. In 2017, What Culture ranked Moon Knight first in their 10 underappreciated Marvel superheroes who deserve their own movies list. In 2019, CBR.com ranked Moon Knight 3rd in their Marvel 10 Best Street-Level Heroes list and 9th in their 10 Most Powerful Members of the Secret Avengers list. Other versions. 2099. The one-shot 2099, Manifest Destiny introduced a female Marvel 2099 version of Moon Knight, fighting crime in the lunar city of Adalan. This version of the character also appears in issue number 14 of Spider-Man 2099. I House of M/I. None. I The Infinity War /I. None. I Marvel Zombies /I. None. Old Man Logan. In the pages of Old Man Logan, a flashback was seen where Moon Knight assisted Daredevil and She-Hulk in fighting Enchantress and Electro in Manhattan. In his fight against Electro, Moon Knight was electrocuted into a state of unconsciousness. is.h.i.e.l.d/I. None. Ultimate Marvel. In the parallel universe of Ultimate Marvel, Mark Spector is a Navy SEAL who becomes a test subject for a super soldier program of the U.S. government. Although he gains increased strength, resiliency to injury, and accelerated healing, the experiment fractures Spector's mind, causing symptoms similar to dissociative identity disorder. Spector now manifests as both his own persona and the alters named Moon Knight and Stephen Grant, as well as an unnamed alter who identifies as a girl with red hair. Like some people with DID, Spector experiences CO consciousness, and so his alters are able to share information and are aware of each other's activities. At times, Spector's alters create a new personality for special situations or will somehow combat each other to take or maintain control. After leaving the U.S. military, Spector temporarily works for the Rah-Khan Corporation as Paladin. After leaving Rah-Khan's employ, Spector's Moon Knight alter takes more control and begins operating as a vigilante in New York City. During this time, Spector lives with his girlfriend Marlene Alron, who is aware he has DID and that one of his alters is the vigilante Moon Knight. During a gang war between the crime lord Kingpin and newcomer gangster Hammerhead, Moon Knight is seriously wounded by the assassin Elektra but escapes to safety. He then encounters the vigilantes Punisher, Spider-Man, and Daredevil. Later on, Daredevil invites Moon Knight to join an organization of superheroes dedicated to bringing down the Kingpin. Spector accepts and then decides to infiltrate the Kingpin's ranks. Opposing how much control the Moon Knight persona has, the personalities of Stephen Grant and Mark Spector create a new alter named Ronan to take command, a ruthless warrior who would be more easily welcomed into Kingpin's organization. The Moon Knight altar opposes this decision, only to then be seemingly destroyed by the new Ronin altar. It is later revealed the Moon Knight altar is not gone, only buried, and in a state mirroring unconsciousness. After Kingpin discovers Ronin is an agent of Daredevil, the crime lord orders the man's execution. Ronin survives an attack and then informs the police that the Kingpin has attempted to murder him. He then calls for the Moon Knight altar to wake once more. Universe X. In Universe X, Moon Knight is locked in a never-ending battle with the Sons of Set, over the statue of Khonshu. It is actually stated that Mark Spector has been dead from the beginning, and just as the moon reflects light, Spector has been reflecting the form of a living man, making him effectively immortal. Moreover, it is also suggested that the original inspiration for the moon god Khonshu was the Watcher Uatu who watches the Earth from his base on the moon. Secret Wars / None. Apocalypse Wars. In the Extraordinary X-Men Apocalypse Wars crossover, a female version of Moon Knight is one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse. She is killed by Nightcrawler, who teleports her into a spiked pit trap. Deadpool kills the Marvel Universe again / None. Infinity Warps. During the Infinity Warps storyline, Moon Knight's life is combined with elements of Spider-Man's history. The result is a character named Peter Spector whose Uncle Ben and Aunt May are killed by the being known as the Goblin by night. Attacked and left for dead by the Goblin, Peter Spector is then revived to be an avatar of a mystical spider deity. Peter gains spider powers but also has his mind split into 4 personas. As the Iraq Knight, he fights crime. As Peter Spector, he rises to become president of his company, working alongside his girlfriend Marlene Jane. He soon discovers the truth from his friend Harry that Norman Osborn was cursed into the Goblin and killed both Ben and May against his will. When the Goblin curse took over Norman's body and transfers its curse infects his own son against his will, Iraq Knight forgives and welcomes a now cured Norman to join his company to find a cure for a recently cursed Harry. Earth 818. On Earth 818, which was ruled by multiversal Masters of Evil member Black Skull, a version of Moon Knight named Mariama Spector is a member of the resistance against Black Skull that is led by Ant-Man. During the fight with Black Skull, Moon Knight and Vision get sucked into one of Black Skull's portals and end up at the center of Infinity, where they are approached by Captain Carter, War Widow, and Longbow, who recruit them into Avenger Prime's army. In other media. Television. According to author Doug Moench, a Moon Knight series was licensed by Toei for production in Japan, but was instead serialized as a manga from 1979 to 1980. Moon Knight appears in the Ultimate Spider-Man episode The Moon Knight Before Christmas, voiced by Diedrich Bader. This version is shown to follow the Moon's advice. He chases Frances Beck before Spider-Man, mistaking Moon Knight for a villain, saves her while house-sitting for Doctor Strange. After figuring out that Frances is the daughter and would-be successor of her father Quentin Beck / Mysterio, Spider-Man works with Moon Knight to defeat her. Using a special wand from a restricted room in the Sanctum Sanctorum, Moon Knight stabs the Mysterio helmet, allowing Spider-Man to free the Becks. Following this, Moon Knight joins Spider-Man, May Parker, and the Becks for Christmas dinner. Moon Knight appears in Avengers Assemble, voiced by Gideon Emery. He first makes a cameo in the episode Avengers World, among the heroes the Avengers plan to recruit in their expansion program before Moon Knight makes his first full appearance in the episode Beyond, in which a pyramid he is guarding ends up in the Battle World domain of Egyptia. When Captain America and Black Widow enter the pyramid and reunite with Iron Man, they fight a mind-controlled Moon Knight and an army of sand-powered mummies to claim an orb he is guarding. Eventually, Iron Man destroys the device controlling Moon Knight, who helps defeat the remaining mummies. Captain America offers him to join the Avengers, but Moon Knight chooses to stay behind and guard the evils contained in the pyramid. Moon Knight appears in the Spider-Man episode Vengeance of Venom, voiced by Peter Giles. This version became a cynical survivalist after someone close to him was killed, leading to him abandoning the Moon Knight identity. Mark Spector saves Spider-Man during the Clontar's invasion, but is reluctant to take on the Moon Knight identity again. Following a pep talk from May Parker during another battle with the Clontar, Spector becomes Moon Knight again and assists in the fight against the aliens. Marvel Cinematic Universe. The characters' dissociative identities of Mark Spector / Moon Knight, Stephen Grant / Mr. Knight, and Jake Lockley appear in live-action media set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, all portrayed by Oscar Isaac, with Carlos Sanchez portraying Grant and Spector as a child while David Jake Rodriguez portrays Spector as a teenager. In the MCU, the Mark Spector identity is depicted as an ex-mercenary who assumes the role of Moon Knight under the Egyptian god, Khonshu, to save his life. The Stephen Grant identity is a British gift shop employee who assumes the alias of Mr. Knight under Khonshu, and the Jake Lockley identity is depicted as brutal and Khonshu's favored avatar. Isaac was in talks for the role in October 2020, and was cast by January 2021, before Marvel officially confirmed his casting that May. The character first appears in the Disney series Moon Knight, which premiered on March 30, 2022. In November 2019, Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige revealed that Moon Knight is set to appear in future MCU films following his introduction in his Disney series. Video games. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in the Wii, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3 versions of Marvel Ultimate Alliance, voiced by Nolan North. Moon Knight appears as an assist character in Spider-Man, Web of Shadows, voiced by Robin Atkin Downes. He assists Spider-Man in his fight with Black Cat before working with him to disrupt the Kingpin's illegal activities and repelling the symbiote's invasion. Moon Knight appears in Hawkeye's ending for Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, as a member of the West Coast Avengers. Moon Knight appears in Marvel Pinball and the downloadable content for Pinball FX2, voiced by Troy Baker. In his own table, Moon Knight battles Morpheus, Midnight, Bushman, Black Spectre, and Khonshu. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in Marvel Avengers Alliance. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in Marvel Heroes, voiced again by Robin Atkin Downes. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in LEGO Marvel Super Heroes. Moon Knight appears in Marvel Avengers Academy, voiced by Alan Adelberg. Moon Knight appears in LEGO Marvel's Avengers, voiced by Keith Silverstein. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in LEGO Marvel Super Heroes 2. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in Marvel Contest of Champions. Moon Knight appears as an unlockable playable character in Marvel Future Fight. Moon Knight appears as a downloadable playable character in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, The Black Order, voiced again by Gideon Emery. He was added through the Marvel Knights, Curse of the Vampire DLC. Moon Knight appears as a playable character in Marvel Strike Force. 2 incarnations of Moon Knight appear in Marvel Future Revolution, voiced again by Gideon Emery. One version is a member of Omega Flight while the other hails from Earth 5468, where he became the sole survivor of Ultron's conquest. Moon Knight appears as an purchasable outfit in Fortnite Battle Royale.